The Baggies Podcast on YouTube, giving you the latest news, views, and opinions on all things Albion. Join me every week for a new episode of the Baggies Podcast, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.
Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of the Baggies Podcast. Wherever you're listening, it's available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and also YouTube. So wherever you're listening from, thank you for joining and welcome to the first ever episode of the Baggies Podcast. We've got lots to talk about in this episode. Firstly, we're going to be reviewing Sunday's topsy-turvy clash with Hull City, where in the end we prevailed victors and we won 4-2. It was more like a basketball match than a football match, but nonetheless, 3 points and 5 points clear of Brentford in third place, and still definitely in that automatic promotion race. We will also be looking ahead to Wednesday night's clash with Derby County, another game which is in desperate need of 3 points for the Baggies, as Brentford are really hotting on our heels. So we're going to be looking ahead to that game, giving action for that. We're also going to be looking, I asked you guys on Twitter actually, where should Callum Morton go after loan from the Baggies? So we asked you guys where he should go, and we're going to be giving you the results from that poll. If you're new around, wherever you're watching from, but if you're on YouTube, make sure you leave a like on the video as well. But without this podcast,
The Baggies Podcast on YouTube, giving you the latest news, views, and opinions on all things Albion. Join me every week for a new episode of the Baggies Podcast, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.
So let's begin, and let's start by talking about obviously the big game yesterday on Sunday, which was between West Brom and Hull City. As I've said earlier, it was a topsy-turvy clash, more like a balances and things like that. Let's talk about the order of events. Let's talk about how things digressed at the Hawthorns. So after it was his birthday morning, which was met by Ahmed Higazi after 37 minutes, and with 47 on the clock, just after half time, seconds after Wilkes' goal, Pereira bagged his third assist of the game, back playing in Cambian goal for the fourth goal of the afternoon after 75 minutes. And then in added time, a bit of a taint on the record for West Brom. Malik Wilkes touched the ball past Ahmed Higazi, who brought him down, given a yellow card earlier on in the game for not retreating for a free kick, and he was sent. First of all, we have to talk about how good Matheus Pereira is. He was just absolutely sublime. It was a real Rolls-Royce performance from him. With 2 goals in midweek, that's his 15th championship assist of the season, with 8 goals added to that as well. He's just in our side. It's really hard to look past him as, anybody apart from that as being our best player. Dictation over the play. He had so much availability in space because he was creating loads of chances for himself, and match obviously with a rating of 9.5. Completed the most passes in the match with 39 and created the most 10 chances, most out of either team. He's got 4 shots, obviously 3 assists, 39 accurate. Another thing you have to start looking at. 7 key passes as well is ridiculous. If you can 3 key passes, if you're a really good player, 7 key passes in this game. Won 3 duels as well. Ball recoveries as well from Matheus Pereira. I mean, it's just the one thing that really highlighted, not the 3 assists alone, but there was this time where Hull City were running in on the box and Matheus Pereira was tracking back on the left wing, doing his defensive duties and making a tackle which, could have saved a goal as well. So Pereira, it's really hard to see how far he can go in his career, because this season alone has shown that he is one of them yet, but we know the terms of the contract and we know the terms of the loan deal, that if he played so many games he does turn into a permanent Albion player. He has just come and set the world alight at Albion, and I'm really pleased to see how well he's getting on. I actually thought Kravinovic was going to be the better player out of the two, because I thought Pereira, bit untried, bit untested in these sorts of situations. Not really played for Sporting Lisbon in his time. Only played 26 games for Sporting Lisbon. Didn't really do it at Nuremberg when he played for them. Didn't even do it at Chaves in Portugal when he played for them. But he's come to us and he's really set the world alight. He's found his mojo in the Championship. And it's no wonder lots of Premier League clubs have started sniffing round him. It's bound to happen. But I digress, obviously. Nobody wants to hear me talking about Matheus Pereira for the hour. Although we could watch Matheus Pereira for the amount of time I do this podcast for. I like to keep my podcast quite short. Not short as in, I like to keep them under half an hour, usually, unless it's a special. But this is going to be about half an hour, so make sure you stick around for the whole thing. The next thing I have to talk about is how open we seemed, the stats. West Bromwich Albion had 22 total shots, 21 chances created, 3 big chances. Hull City had 15 shots, 14 chances created, and 3 big chances. So there were chances going left, right, and centre for both teams. There was a lot of openness in the play. It was a basketball match, as I've already mentioned. Hull City did have ample chances, and I think if we were to play a better team, and a better team that aren't in struggling form. I mean, they've been in awful form before that Middlesbrough game. They hadn't won since the 4th of January in the FA Cup before the last Thursday. But Hull City haven't been looking at their best, and they were still managing to get off opportunities against us. I mean, I've got a podcast, but I'm not a football expert. But we were not limiting them to as many chances as they should be having as a team at that area of the table. And a lot of that came from the problems that we had from corner kicks. George Honeyman was causing havoc with the corner kicks that he was taking. Johnston did not look comfortable. I mean, I don't like to trash talk Johnston because I think he's a really good player. I think he's a great goalkeeper, a great shot stopper. But sometimes he just did not look comfortable in that game when they were swinging those corners right under his bar. It's funny because I get there early to games a lot of the time, and I get there and I see him hitting balls, and with his distribution, he's hitting balls over to the side of the pitch like he sometimes does in games, but not very often enough. And he's hitting them. He's landing them on the sixpence really onto the goalkeeping coaches. Game, he doesn't really catch the ball much in his own area. He doesn't really dictate that goal mouth area as well as he did, really. If you look at the opposition net, he may not be the best keeper in the world, nowhere near as good as Sam Johnston in shot stopping or anything like that. But George Long came out when we were trying to swing corners in right under his nose. Here, if you talk about the high claims, George Long had 2 high claims compared to Sam Johnston with no high claims in that game. It's just when I get there early in the games, I can see him catching those balls so comfortably. And when it's in the game, he seems to like have a punch or a flap at it. I don't know because he's obviously doing it right when he's doing training and he's doing the warm up and he's catching those balls and he's coming out and getting himself ready for the game. But when it's in a match situation, he puts a lot of pressure on his defence. He's real swinging in corner. An in-swinger really, and Johnston isn't coming to catch. He's staying locked on his goal line. That makes you really start to question whether you're going to have to backpedal towards your own goal, and that ball could end up anywhere. If you take the example of Hull City keep fashion corners, it's what Pulis used to do when we were at the Baggies. He used to get Chris Brunt, get that in-swing corner on the right under the bar, and you will just get Macaulay, Dawson flying at the keeper, and however it goes in, but it was Grosicki on the edge of the area, but not being first to the ball, and it ended up being a goal. But there were ample. Hull City had 7 corners in the match, and we did not look comfortable defending them. It was from the set piece situations much because I think he's a really good goalkeeper. As I've said, he's an excellent shot stopper, and I think he's a crack with the catching the ball from corners, dictating his penalty area, and also making sure that his distribution. When we play Kieran Gibbs and Darnell Furlong together, they sometimes he plays those balls over, and they go right over their heads. Sometimes that mistakes happen, but it does happen quite a lot. It's the same with the corners, and I didn't issue with Sam Johnston because obviously you don't want to have that sort of issue in the Premier League because he could be a really good Premier League goalkeeper. He could establish himself as one of the best, and even make himself get an England call up if he irons out these 2. But now I've kind of gone over the only negative point really from that game. Otherwise, it was a really good performance from the Baggies. Lots of really fluid attacking football. Obviously, I've mentioned the openness of the game and very open at times. But otherwise, a really good performance. Glad to see Charlie Austin getting 2 goals in 2. One against Sheffield Wednesday. Even though that was a penalty, it was really nice to see him get the goal today. Obviously on his birthday as well. Charlie Austin looking quite sharp in front of goal for that first goal. It was Kevin Stewart failed to clear that. It bounced off the top of his head, just fell to Austin, and he stabbed that home. Of course, another thing I have to highlight is how good Kamil Grosicki looked. That is the sort of player that we thought that we might be getting. I mean, everybody hoped it would be Jared Bowen, and I'm making no mistakes about that. Everybody wanted it to be Jared Bowen when they heard we were signing a winger from Hull. But no, Kamil, he hasn't been in the side very much of late. Obviously, that's his first start as well since joining in January. But he was really good against Sheffield in the week, only getting 21 minutes of games time, but still getting that assist. And again, getting a goal today, the other day, it was really nice to see that. He's made quite a few substitute appearances, but not enough time for him to be able to get that key influence in the game. But I think Kamil Grosicki's been a good signing and will be a good signing in the future. He's 32 years of age now, but that doesn't let that not take away his quality. He's very inventive, Kamil Grosicki. He likes to create chances, take on players, and he's not afraid to do that. And you love having a player like that in your side because sometimes when you need a bit of inspiration, when the chips are down, say against Birmingham, we didn't look like scoring very much. He's the sort of player you needed, and obviously wasn't on the bench in any of those 2 games. But it was nice to see him get a start yesterday, and obviously coming off the bench and getting that assist in midweek. Another good thing I have to highlight from the Baggies yesterday was how good Dara O'Shea looked. He may not get the plaudits because obviously he's playing right back. He didn't really get in on any of the goals. Obviously we scored 4, but he didn't really get in on any of that action. But I have to say, when you look at the two right back options at the moment, you've got Dara O'Shea and you've also got Darnell Furlong. But at the moment, and Dara O'Shea's winning that race for me at the moment. I feel like Darnell sometimes doesn't offer you enough defensively. Sometimes can be a bit, I don't want to say dozy. I want to say a bit. Sometimes he looks like he's away with the fairies occasionally when he's playing right back, and sometimes he doesn't track his man as well as he should. But Dara, obviously, he's a centre back by trade. I mean, he's having not made many professional appearances before. Of course, obviously playing for Exeter, playing for Hereford, not made many professional appearances before. But when he's playing for West Brom, he at right back, he just looks the part for me. He looks like that sort of player that you can rely on now. I mean, he's only young. He's only 21 years old. He's still got time to develop, but at the moment he looks like an assured defender. And although Darnell Furlong's known as an attacking right back, Dara O'Shea looks quite good attacking as well. There were times where he just burst down the line in that game and just took players on, and it was really nice to see, getting some crosses into the box. A real positive play from Dara O'Shea, and he really stood out for me as a really good player yesterday, and he played really well. Another mention, Connor Townsend, really nice cameo from him. 36 minutes on the pitch today, but he looked really assured again. 54 minutes on the pitch. He came on after 36 minutes, but he looked really assured. Pass success really good. Again, lots of tackles, lots of physicality. I must say he did wind up John Terrell a bit, but I have to say John Terrell, he's a really good player. I like John Terrell of Hull City, but if he spent half as much of the time, I tweeted about this yesterday, but if he spent half as much time as he did rolling around the floor, squealing and picking fights with other players and rubbing up everybody off the wrong way, he'd actually be quite a good player. If he spent as much time focusing on his game than doing those things, he'd be such a quality player, because he had a good game yesterday. He looked quite creative, but he spent so much time rolling around trying to win free kicks that just weren't there to win. If he just cut some of that nonsense out, I think he'd be a really good player, and he'd have a really good influence on Hull City's side. But at the moment, that Hull City in a little bit of trouble. If we have a little focus on them for a minute, they are 21st in the league, 1 point above Middlesbrough. They just don't look quite up to it at the moment. I feel that game was one they could have actually won if they took their chances properly, if they had those chances and they took them properly. But they got Bristol City on Wednesday night, so it's a chance for them to get some points in. It's a chance for them to gain some points. But Middlesbrough, obviously new manager under Neil Warnock, are 1 point below them, so there's a chance that Hull City could be dragged into that relegation. But obviously a really good game from the Baggies, really good game. Glad to see that we got another 3 points. I have to say it wasn't one for people with heart conditions or high blood pressure or anything, because they must have been going through the roof when those corners were being swung in for Hull City. But a good 3 points and 5 points clear of Brentford. But let's move on to talk about the game at Derby on Wednesday. So let's get on to that game against Derby. They've been in pretty decent form since the lockdown was lifted. 20th of June they beat Millwall 3-2. They beat Reading 2-1 the following week. Then last Wednesday beating Preston 1-0. Then drawing 1-1 with Nottingham Forest. They've been looking really sharp actually, Derby, and they're now starting to mount a bit of a promotion push towards Cardiff, who are in 6th place with 64 points. They're on 61, so they're only a win away. They've really got something to play for. They're not one of those teams that are just going to keel over and let us take the points. We're going to have to play our best game against them. They looked alright against Nottingham Forest actually, obviously grabbing that last minute winner, but their defence looked pretty solid for a large period of that game. A player I had to highlight is George Evans, playing at centre-back in this particular game, but having a lot of the ball and having a lot of possession, him in particular. Obviously a lot of playing around the back, trying to play out from the back, and obviously Louis Sibley has been a bit of a breath of fresh air towards Derby, with only six appearances, and he started his Derby career before the lockdown when he played in the FA Cup game against Manchester United. But he's looked really good since returning. Let's have a look at how he's done. He got three goals, all three against Millwall, an assist against Reading. He's been a breath of fresh air for Derby. I've said that, and I'm going to say it again. He's been a breath of fresh air. Chris Martin obviously getting the goal late on against Nottingham Forest. But Derby are not going to be one of those teams that are just going to keel over and take the points. We're going to have to play our best game against them. They're a team that likes to play a bit of possession football. They try their best, to be fair. They try and knock the ball around quite well. George Evans was really pivotal in that centre back, bringing the ball out from the back, bringing the ball into the midfield, and he looked really good in that sort of position. So let's have a look at our 5 previous matches against Derby. Derby have won 3 out of those last 5. We've won 1, and we've also drawn 1. The last game we played against them was in August. We drew 1-1 with them. If you remember, it was a game of 2 penalties, really, a game of 2 halves and 2 penalties. Martin Waghorn scoring the penalty after 6 minutes, and then Kenneth Zoel for us scoring after 84 minutes. So it's going to be one that's going to be. And obviously, if you do remember, Sam Johnson also saved that only penalty that he saved this season. But if you remember, Derby beat us 3-1 in that game towards the end of last season. They also beat us earlier on in that season as well. So Derby, they're a good side. There's no getting away from it that they're going to be quite good, and they've got something really to play for. But so have we, and I feel like we've got to go out there and play our best game. They haven't lost to us in their last 4 meetings, and they've scored in their last 6 away games. So Derby, they've got a lot going for them at the moment. So hopefully we can go and get that win off them, and hopefully we can go and get a victory off them. So we're going to talk about some more star players from Derby. We like to focus on the opposition, much as Slaven Bilic will be. And I feel like a lot of the time on Sky Sports, obviously they're the only company doing EFL coverage apart from iFollow, which is where you can watch every single Championship game, which is not an advert, but that is just where you can watch all of them. But it seems to be the Wayne Rooney show, and Wayne Rooney this, Wayne Rooney that, and I feel like he's been good since he joined Derby in that sort of quarterback role. Coming from America, that's traditional, coming and getting that quarterback role. But he's scored 6 goals since joining Derby, and he's also got 2 assists. So he's been doing a decent job. But he's not all that. He's getting old. I know he's a good player. They've got 3 players on 10 goals this season, Derby. I mean, they're a bit like us. They like to share the goals around in their squad. Chris Martin with 10, Martin Waghorn with 12, and Tom Lawrence with 10 again. So they've been doing quite well. But Derby, Philip Koku's side are going to be a big stern test for the Baggies this week, and it's going to be interesting to see whether we can get that result. And hopefully we can, because we've got a lot of things going for us as well. Don't forget that we haven't now lost for the last 2 games. Obviously that's quite a record, but we have scored 7 goals in those 2 games. So obviously our attack's looking pretty decent, and hopefully we can go and get that result against Derby. So, as we've discussed earlier in the intro, we are going to be talking about what should happen to Callum Morton next season. So, before I give you the results of that poll, I have to sort of talk about Callum Morton and his sort of position in the Northampton squad in their promotion, because if you didn't know, they got promoted to League One via the playoffs. So we're going to have to talk about how he got on there, because it's going to help you guys decide what you guys would like to do with him. So if you didn't know, Callum Morton went on loan to Northampton Town. He gained a total of 12 appearances, and he also got 8 goals whilst he was over there. I mean, he's only been playing since really February, and he's already managed to notch up those 8 goals. But he was very, very good again for Northampton Town. Let's have a look at some of his stats. So 9 appearances, 7 starts, 5 goals, 614 minutes played, 123 minutes per goal. So that's just over a game per goal, let's say. 5 goals inside the box, 1 left foot, 4 right foot. There was also 9 key passes, 9 chances created, 51 accurate passes, 6 shots on target, 5 dribbles succeeded, 3 tackles succeeded, 2 accurate crosses. So he has had a good time at Northampton Town, and he also scored in that League 2 playoff final early on in that game. After 31 minutes he got his goal. He was the most fouled player on the pitch in that game with 4 times, but he obviously made his mark at Wembley as well. Scoring that goal at Wembley is going to mean a lot to him, even if Wembley Stadium was empty at the time. But Callum Morton putting in a really, really assured performance in that Wembley game, and also scoring in the other League 2 playoff game when they played Cheltenham in the semi-final to come back, and he scored twice in that game where he was man of the match. So we asked you guys, what should Callum Morton do? Should the club let him go back to Northampton Town? That was option 1. Stay at West Bromwich Albion was option 2, or get loaned to another Championship club. 36% of you voted go on loan to Northampton Town, 11% of you voted to stay at West Bromwich Albion, and 53% of you voted to go on loan to another Championship club. So you guys obviously want to see him step up a level. So do I. We had 36 total votes on this poll, but obviously I want to see him step up to the Championship, see if he can handle it. If he can't, no problem, recall him, send him to a League 1 club, send him to League 2, that's fine. We do need 11 points to guarantee automatic promotion at the moment, but if Callum Morton, if he can show his stuff in the Championship, who knows, he could be making starting appearances next season. Sorry, the season after next, if he goes on loan. But I think Callum Morton's got a really good chance of gaining a starting spot in the next couple of seasons, or even just making a bit of an impact. If he's scoring that many goals in that many games for Northampton Town when he's on loan, who knows what he could do when he's a permanent member of the West Bromwich Albion side. But a bit of an advert on this podcast now. If you are interested in coming on the podcast, on the West Brom podcast, next episode, whatever episode, talk about whatever you guys would like. So if you got a point you want to make about the Albion, you've got something that you want to talk about on the Albion, you feel like somebody's not pulling their weight, you feel like somebody's really is pulling their weight that people don't really recognise, get in touch on my Twitter, which is at the Baggies Pod, and if you're on YouTube, it'll be in the description. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you'll be able to look at it in the description of the podcast. If you guys want to go and just check out my Twitter page, you can send me a DM, comment on one of my posts or something, say I want to come on and talk about this, and I'll give you, we'll have a phone call and we'll talk about it, and you guys can be on next week's podcast. So if you have enjoyed this podcast, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, follow me on a Spotify podcast, or subscribe and leave a like rating on YouTube if you're new. If you've enjoyed, please can you share the podcasts around, get people to listen. Hopefully we'll have more listeners next week and more listeners this week as well. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed the maiden episode of the Baggies Podcast. As I say, if you are interested in coming on the podcast, make sure you let me know, because I'm always willing to I'm hoping to add like a fan reaction section of the podcast if we get enough people, maybe 3 or 4, something like that, 3, 4, 5 people on to come and talk and share their views about the Baggies. But until next time, hopefully we get that 3 points at Derby, and hopefully we stray more towards the automatic promotion. As I said, 11 points to secure automatic promotion. So I'll see you next week. I'll see you in the next episode of the Baggies Podcast, and come on you Baggies, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
The Baggies Podcast on YouTube, giving you the latest news, views and opinions on all things Albion. Join me every week for a new episode of the Baggies Podcast, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and YouTube.